Seahawks 360 podcast, a SportsEthos production. We look at the Seahawks from every angle every week. I'm your host, Candace Higgins.
Now I'm Tino Ganasius.
And we are here to talk the unfortunately final game of the Seattle Seahawks 2023-2024 season. So we had a lot to break down, really, because it really is about a lot to talk about, not just with the team and how the game went, but also just moving ahead and what this team can look like. But, generally, Tino, I kick it out to you, but I got a lot on my chest today. Can I get that out first, Tino, before I get it to you?
Do your thing.
I just got to get my overall arcing thoughts here, man. And I tweeted passionately. If you follow me on Twitter, it's SportsEthos or Ethos Seahawks, then you kind of know sort of where I'm going. But man, this was a game that I just flat out don't think the Seahawks deserve to win. Man, I really don't. You look at the stats and they got beat on first downs. They got beat on time of possession. Arizona had 36 minutes to, I think, Seahawks 23. They just got dominated on so many ends. Ultimately allowed 206 rushing yards, which, once the news that Jerry Reed was announced that he'd be missing, I kind of figured that they were going to get 200 yards, but they really got outplayed, I think, in every way. And ultimately, it was Arizona Cardinals. Yes, it came down to a final field goal attempt, but they'd also missed another field goal, if I'm not mistaken, in the game too, that really would have made the difference in the game. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, Tino, but if I'm remembering that correctly, I know there was a fake field goal attempt, but also I thought that there was that was successful for the Cardinals. I thought that they missed a field goal too that would have upped the score, made a difference. So I think really the Seahawks are lucky to say they have a winning season. And I think the fact that they can say they have a winning season is probably the most fluky of the year. And I didn't feel that way last year when they, barely kind of squeaked into the playoffs. I think that game, can't remember who their last opponent was last year. Was it the?
I don't remember.
Who was it?
I don't remember either. Last year.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who it was. It was a good game. I can't remember who it was that they beat. Anywho, I remember that was a strong win, right? That was a win worthy of one, and you kind of hoped that they were going to get into the playoffs after that. And this game was anticlimactic in every way. You found out, maybe in the third quarter at some point, towards the end of the third quarter, that the Packers had won and that the Seahawks weren't going to go to the playoffs anyway. Mm-hmm. I pretty much resigned myself to the fact that they were going to lose this game, and then on the fluke play, they don't. So anyway, I'll talk to you, Tino. I know I've talked enough, but man, I was actually not happy about a win for once.
Right. So a couple things. Once, as you said, once Green Bay had won, and we learned that, I think, probably, late third, early fourth quarter, somewhere in there, I stopped being interested in this game. I think the only interest I had in this game once they lost once Green Bay won was I preferred the Seahawks to lose for draft position, right? Mm-hmm. And because there was nothing else to gain from winning. I get that they want to continue the winning culture and all those sorts of things, so they had a winning season. But in my mind, as a fan, there's nothing to gain from a victory. Secondly, I know that Pete preaches, specifically when Russell was here, but he preaches keep the game close. We're better than the other team. We're mentally stronger. We can win the close games. But close games are not always about whether you're better or not, right? A lot of times good seasons are luck, right? Some teams might go 8-0 in close games, or might go the next season 2-6. It's not necessarily a skill. And so you see it a lot in baseball when there's 162 games. You'll see it play out where a team will have a great season and make the playoffs, but a lot of it was just luck in terms of those close games. And I think the Seahawks to be playing 4 close games, right, to try to keep it close in the fourth, you're playing with fire. And I think that's part of why we see these 10-7, 9-8 type of seasons all the time. I want them to go and blow everybody out. I want them to be dominant, right? And that's not who they are right now. So as far as the game yesterday, yes, I agree. They were lucky to win. I think that, it was interesting online, people were kind of coming around as far as Geno Smith goes, because so many stats said he was so great at the end of games this season.
Mm-hmm.
And, while I tend to agree with that, I still think the question has to be asked, can Geno Smith win you a Super Bowl? And I think that question, while we said definitively no the last time we talked, I'm willing to consider, if you're going to make the rest of the team great around him,
yeah,
and you can have a great defense, I do think Geno Smith can win. But if you're not going to have a great defense, the answer for me is no. I also think because of his age, it's time to start thinking about the succession plan for him. I think it's time to draft a quarterback, whether Geno Smith is your quarterback in 25 or not. And the big thing that I keep going back to is, and we said it last week, you need an identity. There is too much talent on this team to not have a defined identity as to who they are. And every single game, it's, are they going to, he said, we're going to run, K9 a whole bunch this game, right? Announcer said, Pete Carroll came out and said that. And he got 17 carries, and 17 carries in this day and age is a good amount of carries. Mm-hmm. But are you a running team? Are you a play action team? Are you multiple? Are you a screen team? What is it that you do? And then defensively, the defense should be top 5 when you look at the talent, and it's just not. It's just not. So again, with this particular game, I could care less. Once Green Bay won, it's whatever to me. I'd rather you lose so that you get a better draft pick. But in my mind, I immediately went to, who's the quarterback next year? Is Pete staying? And if Pete is staying, what are the coordinator and coaching changes that are on the way? That, to me, those are the biggest questions, because I think even if you just drafted and kept the players that you had, I think this is potentially with the right coaching, a very good team. This is a 12-5 team talent-wise to me, not a 9-8 team. Right?
Yeah, I would
team that should be competing with the Niners for the division based on talent alone.
Correct. 100% agree.
So if we can move on, what is your feeling in this moment about Pete Carroll? He has 2 years left on his contract. We know that at some point in time, Jody Allen's probably putting the team up for sale, but we don't know when yet. What does your gut say in this moment, day after the final game of the 2023 season? 2023-24 season?
Well, one thing I do want to point out is that we found out something interesting, I think maybe right before the game, and that is that Pete Carroll's 2025 year is actually an option. And I can't remember if it's
club option or
that's what I'm trying to struggle to remember. I can't remember if it was a club option or a coaching option, but it's not. His contract is actually through 2024, and then there's a question about what that option looks like. I think Phil Goetz had an article on it earlier on Sunday, if you're trying to quickly look it up. Mm-hmm. But I do remember seeing that it's not. So we all kind of assumed that they were just, 2 years baked in, but that's not necessarily the case. So that could make things a little bit interesting. So that really is contract wise, he's only under contract officially for 1 more year. So that is a pretty interesting monkey wrench when you're thinking about the overall scheme of things. Unfortunately for me, I never really doubted that Pete Carroll was going to go anywhere as much as I advocate for it and as much as I truly fundamentally believe it's needed. I just know Jody Allen as an owner, and you can see her work with even the Portland Trail Blazers, how they were ran into mediocrity until they had to eventually tank, and then they got nothing for all those years of Damian Lillard and opportunity. It really is unfortunate. I've watched that enough to feel confident that she wasn't going to make a move on Pete, even though, like I said, it really does need to be done. I think he does need some questioning. And I hate to be in this position because I'm all gloom and doom, man. I am. And I'm not, I don't think I've ever felt that way about this team because I've never been out on Pete, I guess, before. I've always sort of been, give Pete some time, let's see where things go. There are other factors at play. Right. But year after year, we have continued to field talented rosters. Right. And I loved the roster. that they had. And that's why I say I'm gloom and doom, because I don't see a world where, so the offense has been your strength. Realistically, let's be honest, about 3 years now. Even in even Russell's final year, that was really up and down. The defense still stunk. It was the offense that still was going to or carry them or not. And if you look at the last 3 years, I think they're some of the most talented they've been. The acquisition of being able to get a Noah Fant, in addition to a Will Dissly, made them, I think, the offense one of the deepest offensive teams we'll ever see. I don't know if they can acquire that level of talent back to have 3 tight ends that, to be honest, well, I don't know if Kobe can be a number. No, it's clear that Will Dissly had been the number one and that Noah Fant on another team had been the number one. So you really had 2 number one tight ends on the same team, where tight end had always been an area of weakness for this squad. You really had 3 wide receivers fully locked. And I know wide receiver had been an issue depth-wise before, but this year they really rounded it out in a way that I thought was almost, not unbeatable, but it was really strong. Now, it turned out that the O-line was not as strong as we thought going into the preseason. And that's unfortunate. But skill position-wise, they're going to have to drop off offensively. I don't think they can keep that. They can't acquire the talent that, from what I understand, they're already $6 million over the cap going into the year 2024. So that's depressing. And then you think about the defense and all the changes that need to be made on the defensive end, and they really don't have the money. They're going to have to make some tough decisions on some veterans. They're going to have to let some people go who I think the fan base overall might like. Now, maybe they cut Jamal Adams. We'll see. Right. Who knows? I don't know. They've restructured his contract. I think I would have said yes, but they've restructured the contract in a way that I don't know. I don't know what they do there. I know they need to do something, but you don't have much optimism about that. You don't have much optimism about. They do have a fair arsenal of draft acquisition. Draft picks. Yeah, but they lost a second. They have 2/3 instead of a second. Not the end of the world, but still not a full arsenal the way that you want, especially given their cap issues right now. And then for me, there's Pete, who's still there. And I tweeted this out. To me, it doesn't matter if they fire Clint Hurt. It doesn't really matter to me if they fire Shane Waldron, who I actually like, by the way, as a play designer. He really just has some bad situational, I think, kinks that he needs to work out in terms of calling plays at the right time. He's still very young, and it shows. Right. I think. I don't know if he'll progress in that area or not, but overall, like his plan, his play design, his play philosophy, and he has improved the offense in some ways that I didn't think. We had been stagnant in for a few years. Screens, especially. Shout out to him for screens, bringing that back. Right. But those things don't matter, because those guys have to ultimately abide the philosophy of Pete Carroll.
Right.
They do. They can't just go rogue. That's not how it works.
So I'm going to zag a little bit. I think, I assumed that the Seahawks weren't going to make the playoffs. And so I've had about a week to think about Pete Carroll and formulate my own opinion as to what will happen. And, I think for me as a fan, at least, he's earned the right to coach the Seahawks until he's done. And I think that's part of that is just he did win a Super Bowl. And I think that's something that I want to honor. Right. And
he's never going to voluntarily leave, right?
Well, I think he leaves after 25.
I don't think he does.
I think he leaves after 25. And then
not voluntarily.
Well, it'd be 74 at that point in time. Right. And
care.
Secondly, I did like the fact that John Snyder came out and said, we have to make major changes internally, right? We're looking at, I don't remember the exact quote, but it was basically, I'm going to clean house and this isn't acceptable. And I think that's what I want to hear from a GM who doesn't make the playoffs. That's what I want to hear from a GM who thinks that the team has underachieved based on the talent he put on the field. And I think that, while it was probably a joint decision or primarily Pete's decision as to who the coordinators were, I think maybe John Schneider makes more of that decision for Pete and says, if you want to stay, I'm going to be more involved in helping you choose the coaches, right? And I think that's a big, big decision to make. And I think it's a really influential decision with this particular team at this particular time. So the ability to choose coordinators and choose your staff is something that head coaches typically want. And I think that Pete Carroll has proven with Sean Desai and obviously Gus Bradley and the whole lineage that he has some ability to do that. But I think he's fallen off. And I think it is time for John Schneider to be more involved with the choice of coordinator. I personally like Shane Waldron. I think, as you said so eloquently, I think that Pete Carroll meddles a bit and with the play calling and doesn't allow for Waldron to really open up and do what he truly wants to do. I do think offensively they're going to really need a more defined identity next season. But to me, the whole issue is the defense. And whether you like Clint Hurt or not, I almost said Clint Hurdle, who was a baseball player in the 90s. Whether you like Clint Hurt or not, there has to be change. I think there has to be wholesale changes on with the defensive scheme and with the coach. And whether Pete wants to do that or not, if I'm John Schneider, I'm saying I gave you so many resources on defense to make this defense better. And you've proven over the last couple of years that you haven't. I'm choosing a coordinator. You and I are talking about scheme. You know, the NFL has passed you by to a certain extent with regards to NFL scheme, but I believe you have the intelligence to figure this out. I'm going to be more involved. I'm going to help you choose a coordinator. We're going to do this together. And we're going to put out there a much better defense in 24 than we have in 23. To me, if the Seahawks stand pat, don't sign a big free agent, they're able to maneuver the cap in a way to keep most every player that they have. I think, you know, you could see, I think Lockett is up, if I'm not mistaken.
No,
I think
he was extended.
He is extended. Okay. So
they did a restructure with him also in the offseason. So his dead cap is higher if they cut him.
Great. So you've got essentially the same offense coming back with except for Disney, right?
Your tight ends. You're missing Noah Fant. You're missing Kobe Parkinson. I think he's on his 4th year. I think they're all free agents. If I could be wrong, but I think they're all free agents. If I'm not mistaken, if there was one position on the offense that I think could be replaceable, it's tight end. We've said that, but we've seen some rough tight end years, man.
100%.
We've said it.
100%. But I think that the identity is going to help to define, what kind of tight end you want, right? Because Disley was a blocking tight end. Fant is a pass catching tight end. What do you want your tight end to do? And it's a position where I don't think they have to invest a ton of resources. So I guess what I'm getting at is you can take the talent that's there. You might fill in with a new tight end, right? We might see Leonard Williams get too expensive, that sort of thing. We might see some changes, but not a ton. But bring most of this team back. Talent is not the issue. Defensive coaching, to me, is the issue. And I don't know to lay that at Clint Hurt's feet or Pete Carroll, but I think with the good defense, or a better defense, I should say, and a similar offense with another year of Smith and Jigba's development, another year of Charbonnet understanding the NFL better, another year of, a healthy Charles Cross year. Right tackle has to be addressed. But in my mind, when I look at that, this is, like I said, this is a 12-win team. Talent-wise, this is a 12-win team. And I'm disappointed in this season, but I do not think that wholesale changes are needed. And I think it's to be careful what you wish for, because there are a lot of coaches out there who are a lot worse than Pete Carroll, right? I know that he hasn't met our expectations the last couple of years, but I've also seen some horrible, across sports, horrible coaches come in to replace legends. And you wish you had that legend back, even if that legend is winning, 9-10 games instead of 12-13. I did pull up Sport Track just now, and it's interesting that all the linebackers, all the inside linebackers are basically free agents. So Wagner, Bush, Brooks are all, I wonder if they completely overhaul that position next season. Maybe you bring back Wagner, but you bring in two young.
They won't compete. I assure you they're going to re-sign Brooks. They love Brooks. They're going to re-sign Brooks. They love him. I think Pete's already said he wants to bring back Bobby.
Okay, so Sport Track, who I trust as far as value and contracts go, you know what the calculated market value is for Jordan Brooks next season?
What's that?
$13.8 million per season.
Mm-hmm. That's about right. Yep.
You better bring in a second safety to pair with Diggs that can actually cover then, because somebody's going to have to cover running backs. And that's why it ain't going to be those linebackers.
That's why I'm frustrated. I mean, that's why I'm so gloom and doom about the season, because it all comes back to Pete, man. Like, I know that they're going to make certain free agent decisions based on Pete's philosophies. Pete's not going to let go of Jordan Brooks. They're not just going to let him walk. I mean, he did have a good year. Now, I think that he had a good year on purpose. It's a contract year. I don't think you can expect the same production out of him if you re-sign him, to be quite honest. I'm not sure he would ever earn that contract truly.
I'm willing to bet you. What should we bet? I'm willing to bet you that they let Brooks walk, in part because I think John Schneider gets involved. I bet you they re-sign Wagner to a similar contract as last year. He made $5.5 million last year. I bet you he signed for 1 year, $5 million this year. Mm-hmm. And I bet you they let Brooks walk, and I bet you they bring in bigger, more, like I talked about, more lean, longer inside linebacker to play with Wagner. I'm willing to bet you some. You tell me what we're betting.
I don't know. I'll think of something. I'll think on. We got all off season, but I think they bring them both back. But I do think they draft somebody. I do think John will draft another guy. I don't think they're going to bring the Devin Bush back. I think they wanted to draft somebody last season. This wasn't as high as a priority. They're going to draft someone this season, hopefully, who can cover this offseason, who can hopefully cover. But I still think that it's going to be a problem, because when you're on the Pete, there are certain trends that will remain the same. That's why I say this. To your point about there being horrible coaches out there, you are 100% correct. Mm-hmm. I am willing to be bad to find the right coach to get them over the hump, instead of being stuck in 9-8 purgatory for the next 4 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, you waste so many rookie contracts, so many opportunities. I mean, I understand. And I think Pete will be like, you think I hate Pete, but it took me a long time to get to this point. Mm-hmm. But I think I am just resigned to, there's only going to be so much change. We've seen complete overhauls. The year they hired Clint Hurd and hired Shane Waldron, we've seen them clean house, get rid of all of the personnel, get rid of all of we've seen a clean house before. We have, like, 2 years ago when they got rid of Russ, like, they entirely cleaned house. And guess what? It still sucked. Like, there were still the same issues. There weren't even new issues. I think I would like even new issues at this point. I'd rather, struggle with something else instead of struggling for the same thing that they've struggled with for the last 5 years. And granted, I suppose the change in struggle, you could argue, your devil's advocate, is a change in not being able to stop the run instead of not being able to stop the pass. Whereas under Ken Norton Jr., everybody was passing on them and felt no need to run. Now people run on us and feel no need to pass. So I guess that's changed. But his philosophy is never to take on any one person's defensive philosophy. He likes to pull different things from and other different elements to make his defense his own. And it never works. It just doesn't. I mean, it doesn't fit your personnel. Prime example. I've argued with people about this on Twitter. Bobby Wagner, who looked pretty bad at times this past season. Mm-hmm. Started off strong, then he looked really bad. Mm-hmm. Why? Because he was constantly put in coverage situations. Well, why does he have to be on the field for 100% of the snaps? Pete Carroll? There's no other reason. There's no reason Bobby has to be on the field on every defensive snap at his age. And yet they continue to put him in that position after having seen him a year, what not having him play 100% of snaps does for him in the trajectory of a whole season, what taking him out of coverage situation does for him, and what he can provide for you. You saw it. You had the film. You had the blueprint that Sean McVay made for you, and you intentionally chose to ignore all of it and go back. And so now the fan base is like, Bobby's cooked. I guarantee you if Bobby goes somewhere else, he's going to look just as great as he did when he was with the Rams, and people are going to want him back because it's all about how you use him.
Right.
It's frustrating.
He needs to be used in, what you assume to be running situations. And I don't think there's a whole lot of other situations where he should be out there. The only argument I think one could make is
blitzing.
Well, also, I think that we've talked about this. He does have an impact in getting at least the front seven situated and in the right positions. I don't think we saw the missed gap assignments that we saw last season or 2 seasons ago this season. I think that he is very good at being the defensive quarterback and he understands, right? But I think you're right. There's an amount of stubbornness there that really does hurt the team. So I have two other things that with regard to contracts. One is we'll stay on the defensive side for now. Leonard Williams, obviously they want to re-sign him and gave up resources to get him.
He was great.
And he was this year's $21 million was his contract. And his average annual salary, according to Sport Track, is $14.8 million. That's what they assume he's going to sign, like a 3-year, $45 million contract on the open market. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, I'm going to argue, based on where they are in the cap, I'm going to argue they have to make a decision whether it's going to be Williams or Brooks, because you can't afford both based on your cap situation.
Right.
In my mind, the way that Brooks gets burnt in coverage, the way that inside linebacker has changed in the NFL, and the impact that Leonard Williams had on that line, I'm re-signing Leonard Williams 10 out of 10 times. And I trust John Schneider with his decision-making with personnel to see that, right? I totally understand what you're saying about the loyalty to players like Brooks. I get what Carroll said, Pete Carroll might say behind closed doors about Jordan Brooks. I don't think that stuff flies anymore. I think, as you said, there's enough mediocrity over the past couple of years to say that's not your decision anymore, Pete. We're re-signing Leonard. We're letting Brooks go. We feel like that position is a bit fungible. We can find somebody else. We're certainly not paying him $15 million a year. Leonard Williams is coming back. So for me, that's one decision I think that they're going to have to make. And then interestingly, on the offensive side, I see here Phil Haynes, Evan Brown, and Damian Lewis are all up this season or after this season. Correct. So the 3 starters on the interior of your offensive line are free agents, right? Yes. We know Bradford takes one of those positions.
Yeah.
We think Oluwatimi has probably earned the right to take the other position at center. I have not watched him enough, but I would assume that's probably what they're thinking.
I'd want to bring in some competition for him and probably some vet competition personally.
Okay. Yes, I agree with that. That's a good call. And then Damian Lewis is up. Damian Lewis's projected annual salary is $7.5 million. And I like Lewis personally. I think he hasn't taken that next step that I think we all thought he could have or might have, but I don't think he's a liability. And so that's going to be another interesting thing, though, is really the only 2 players set on that line going into 24 is Cross and Bradford. Right. And so
and Lucas, who is a real question mark health.
Well, that's why I didn't name him. I didn't name him because we don't know the way his injury sounds. We don't know. He might retire, right? A medical retirement based on, what's going on with his injury. So what I'm saying is I'm not counting on him. If I'm going into the draft or free agency, I'm not assuming Abe Lucas is my right tackle because I think that's a recipe for disaster.
Then they have to account for that in their decision contracts. I agree with you, but I think that you have to acknowledge it, because then it's just one more spot you have to fill. Because now, at first we just said they needed a better backup right tackle. Now they need two, the starting caliber and a quality backup, because you really don't know. This Abe Lucas thing is one of the weirdest things I think I've come across since the Chris Carson injury, and that doesn't make me feel great.
Right.
Yeah.
There are a lot of, so one more thing, when I look at these personnel decisions and I look at this team and I look at who's a free agent this season, I actually am pretty comforted. I think there could be there are teams that are going to have a lot more important decisions to make. I think with the Seahawks going into 24, it literally is, what are you doing with your offensive line? And are you re-signing Williams or Brooks, excuse me? And there's not a whole lot else, right? You got Darrell Taylor.
No, you need your tight ends. You definitely need to upgrade your edge group. I think
at tight end though, I think that Parkinson is the only one who is a true free agent this season.
Noah Fant should be a free agent.
Let me see here.
Noah Fant and Will Dissly, I thought, are both free agents.
All I'm seeing is Parkinson, but I'll keep looking.
Let me look at their contracts. Because I know Dissly signed an extension, but I was under the impression that extension ended in 2024. Let's see. Yeah. No, you're right. Okay, they do have this for one more year.
Mm-hmm. And it's a big Fant here, right? It's like $8 million, I think.
Did they extend Fant? No, they didn't.
No, but I'll keep looking here. But I guess the point is just that
Fant is a free agent and Colby is a free agent. They still have Will Dissly for one more year.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you're gonna either re-sign Fant, or you're gonna be looking for a pass catching tight end, basically.
Yeah, I think more than likely, I think they maybe try to reacquire Kobe, perhaps, and then maybe they draft somebody. So I think they let Fant walk. I don't think they can afford to. They got other decisions to make, but I guess that's what frustrates me the most. You look at the free agent list and you see optimism. For me, I just see they're going to have to work super hard just to maintain the same level of talent. We're not talking about really making any improvements. Mm-hmm. There's no real room to improve. You're just trying to not have a huge drop off talent-wise, because you're already over the cap. So you're going to have to make some really tough decisions just to basically stay afloat on a team that I do think needs some upgrades personnel-wise in certain positions. Mm-hmm. That's what leaves me discouraged.
See, I trust. Well, one, I think that salary cap in the NFL is flimsy, meaning
John Snyder.
You see New Orleans every year is like $20 million over the cap going into the offseason, and somehow they acquire a bunch of players, right?
But that's not John Snyder.
Creative.
That's not John Snyder. We know that.
But they all have to change, right? If they're going to be good. The other thing is, John Snyder has proven to be such a good GM with regards to drafting that I trust him to infuse this team with talent through the draft every single year. I think that's the thing that he does best. And while we don't have the number 5 pick overall, I do think that's something that we can count on with him to make this team better. I do think we'll see people cut that we don't expect to see cut because they are close to the cap. I don't know who those players are off the top of my head, but I do expect to see some of that. But I don't know. I'm maybe it's just my disposition, but I feel optimistic about what this team can accomplish, even with the same GM and the same coach as they've had all these years. The talent is there. It takes a tweak. You need a bad defensive coordinator who can come in and motivate these guys and say, this is my scheme. This is what we're doing. And we're going to go out there and we're going to be aggressive. We're going to dominate. We're going to play man. We're going to blitz. Our edges are going to be great again. And give me a safety that can cover. Right?
Clint Hurt quite literally said that in his introduction press conference. So the problem is you can say that all day long. And if Pete Carroll says, no, actually, we need to mix in these philosophies. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like, you could come in and say, this is my plan. This is what we're doing all day long. And if Pete says we're a zone team, you need to implement more zone in your strategy. And let's try to get fired. Guess what you're going to have to do? Implement more zone. And that's what continues to discourage me, because we've heard all of that before. You bring in somebody with new ideas and they're going to be more aggressive and they're going to play more press. And they even acquired the personnel to match that philosophy. That's why I know it's just Pete. John Snyder recruited the personnel to match what Clint Hurt was saying. So you be more aggressive, so you can have more man coverage.
Right.
And guess what they do? The opposite of what the personnel was acquired for, which to me speaks to a disconnect between the GM and the coach. Pete's doing his own thing. It doesn't matter what they give him. He's doing his own thing. Right. He's sticking to his philosophies, and he has adapted in some ways. I'm not going to say he hasn't made any changes. That would be untrue. He has adapted and he's grown in certain ways, but they're marginal. And the core of the issues don't actually change. And so I feel here's what's going to happen. I feel we're going to look up at the end of going to training camp. Mm-hmm. And I think that last year's roster would have just been better. I don't think there's going to be any debate. I think by the time they finish having to shave off some talent to reacquire some of the same talent, I think your overall roster talent drops, period. Because you're going to have to get rid of somebody to make room to even float. And yeah, they could have some good draft picks, but then you're at another season where you're banking on rookies. That's never good. It's never good to be in a season where you're banking on the rookies.
Agreed.
So then I'm not going to be more optimistic about the offseason if the best case scenario is banking on rookies.
I think they free up more money than we think. I think you're going to see players like Adams, Brooks, Mario Edwards, right?
I forgot about him. Is he a free agent?
Yeah.
Yes. Dang it. I like him.
I do too, but you can upgrade there, right? I think you're going to see those types of players go. And I do think that, and then you're going to get Nwosu back, which I think really does change the complexion of the defense.
It does.
And so I also think that the way it sounded, at least after this game, that John Schneider really is going to say to Pete, this isn't your choice anymore, right? We're not going to bring in a new coordinator and have you implement the same, BS that you have been, because it's not working. Our team is too good to be 9-8. So if you want to come back next season, right, you're going to have to abide by more of the ideas that other people are putting forth. I really think that's what's going to happen. That's the way it sounded at the end of this season. And I think Pete is, I know we talk about how stubborn he is. I think he's smart enough to understand that what he's doing isn't working. I really do. And maybe I'm putting too much trust in him. Maybe I'm putting too much into the kind of person that I think he is. But I think he has the ability to be open-minded enough to understand that he's made mistakes, right?
I think they would have had they not won the game. But if you listen to Pete's post-presser, he's pretty pleased overall.
I also would say he probably says one thing in a press conference and may feel differently behind closed doors, right? And I don't know. I'm
not sure Pete's ever been as much of and I felt this way for some time. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure he's ever prioritized. Yes, he wants to win another championship. I think for that, mostly because of how the last one went down. Mm-hmm. But I also think he cherishes winning so much that he's more than fine with regular season wins. Right. He's not a guy that would sacrifice regular season wins at all for the greater good of being the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Any win he can get, he'll take and he's happy with. And I think that's what keeps them complacent, because he's fine 9-8.
You sure about that? You think he's fine 9-8?
I do. I think he's fine. I think he's fine. I think he's more fine than most. I'll say that. Now, I'm sure some part of him thinks that they could be better, but I also think he just wants to win. And technically he did. So he's still, keeps putting out there winning seasons, right? He can't say he lost the season. And I think that's going to be of some value to him more than others, I think. She said things over the years that I just feel like sort of imply winning is important to him, but I'm not sure that I've heard him talk about winning it all as much as winning each game and treating that game like the championship game. Right.
So, okay. You may very well be right. And if you are right, then I want a new coach, because I want a coach that's upset. You need to stay steady, right? And you need to steer your team. But I want a coach that's upset with every loss, and a coach that wants to win a Super Bowl every year and is upset and obsessive when they don't. And if that's not who Pete Carroll is at 72 years old, right? If he's content with the 9-8 season, then I want a new coach. That goes for every sport for me as a fan.
Yeah. He's more content than I'd like him to be. And I know he doesn't like losses, period. He doesn't like those.
Right.
But again, I think that's within the spectrum of a regular season, right? So I think he'd also be fine with 12-5. And if they went home in the first round, he'd be good with that too. You know what I'm saying? So it's really the same thing where he doesn't I have no question that he doesn't he hates losing. He does. But I don't think he prioritizes the top. You don't hear Pete Carroll talk about treating every game like a championship, but you don't hear him talking about getting to the championship.
Sure.
Right. And I think that means something.
I do too. If that's the case, though, that means that there's some fire missing, right? That means that despite his antics and his excitement, that there's something that's not quite there. I look at Mike Tomlin, who granted is a much different age, but I look at Tomlin and I think, he's still very much motivating the team and very much invested in winning and not happy when they don't make the playoffs, right? You can't be a coach in any major sport without wanting to win every game.
Yeah.
It's just, and even if you don't feel that way 100% publicly, I want you to come across that way, right?
Right.
And I think that might be some of the frustration people have with Pete is when you're not winning big, that doesn't, it doesn't sit well with people.
Right.
I don't know. I think this is going to be a super interesting offseason for the team. More interesting than probably any of the last maybe 8 outside of the offseason where Russell Wilson gets traded. I
think it's a fork in the road.
It is. Yes. Perfect.
Fork in the road. Because I feel like last offseason it was really exciting. Last offseason was just super exhilarating. You were excited about everything. All the opportunities are on the table. And it just seems like that's flipped on its head. And they make one wrong move and this thing goes downhill. It really seems like every transaction that they make is going to be critical in determining their long-term success, because they do have, as young as this team is, they have a good mix of veteran contracts that they're locked into. It's not like it's a full rebuilding team. They have to make some tough choices.
Seahawks.
Let me ask you this. We hadn't talked about this yet, and I'm curious to get your take. It was something I personally was passionate about. So after the game, the team is celebrating. They got cigars in, and according to the team, they were celebrating the birth of Julian Love's baby, not the season. Do you have any thoughts on that? You may not. I have thoughts on that, but you might not have any thoughts on that at all.
I do. I think the younger me would have said, what are they doing? You didn't win nothing. You're not in the playoffs. Why are you celebrating? You should be. And I would say this to my own daughter, and I have. she was a softball star. You know, she's 21 now and applying to law school, which is awesome. But she was a superstar, and she'd go 3 for 4, and I'd ask her why she got out with that one out, even though she was hitting 750. And so, you know, the criticism that they received for that is, I understand where it comes from. At this age, for me, I think, I don't know what their bodies go through, you know, being an NFL player. My understanding is it feels like you're in a car accident every week. They've dedicated their lives to this. I think the idea of getting through a season and saying we made it through is, I'm not going to hate on that. That wouldn't be me, right? I wouldn't choose to celebrate that if that's indeed what they're celebrating. But who am I to say that they shouldn't? And if they're celebrating the birth of Julian Love's kid, that's not our place either. So my take is, the younger me would have been critical, assuming that they were celebrating the end of the season. The older me says, if that's what you choose to do, that's on you. If I was a defensive back for the Seahawks, I probably wouldn't do the same thing, but I'm not. So you do you.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And I say I don't like it because of a couple of reasons. One, it was on the back of Tariq Woolen. I don't know if you saw or caught his like celebration, his like grabbing his crotch celebration there at the end of that field goal, which I just thought, I mean, that had me fuming. I mean, you got literally run over all game and then you win on a fluke play, and then you just want to act like you just did. I hate I guess I'm concerned about because it was coupled with that. No. I think I was already upset about seeing Tariq Woolen do that. And I've seen them do that before, where they're like chippy and like talking on second down and like, yeah, I got you before. And then you give up third down and you get right. So it's been this pattern for me of like, do we really have the right mindset here of picking and choosing when we celebrate, and then when it really matters, then you come up short, but you want to talk a bunch of crap leading up to it. So that's, I will admit that it wasn't just the cigars for me. It's like, I've been seeing this all season, and it sort of just made me wonder, like, what is the headspace of these people, these players? Like, I just don't feel like that's the fundamental right thought process. And so then I see them celebrating in the locker room. And all right, it's for the kid. The kid was born in December 23rd. Like, if they were genuinely like celebrating the birth of the child, he was born before Christmas.
Do you think they're like, we're not going to smoke a cigar until after the season? Do you think they're that focused, like, on their bodies and whatnot? Maybe. But then if you're going to wait, why not get out of the locker room? Because I think they should celebrate. I think almost from when I've never been on a football team. Obviously, I'm a girl. But like, from what I understand about sports in general, there is a time where you go have a end of season party at one of the players' homes and you cook out and you celebrate and you smoke cigars. And so I guess my question is, if you waited from December 23rd, why wouldn't you do that then? Not saying they shouldn't celebrate what they've accomplished. They're healthy. They made it through a season. You're 100% correct. Like, just being healthy is a reason to celebrate. And that's why I don't really knock the Quandre Diggs, like, forever grateful tweet after every game. And I get where he's coming from, because I think for him, he's just celebrating health, if nothing else. Like, that doesn't bother me. It's a very violent sport. So, but you barely won and you just found out you're not going to the playoffs. And so the timing couldn't be worse. If nothing else, the timing couldn't be worse. Right. Like the Tariq Woolen cross grab, I don't know. When Marshawn does it, it's cool. When Reek does it,
Marshawn ran over folks, man.
Yeah, no, I agree. Favorite, tied for my favorite probably Seahawk of all time with Kurt Warner. I get it. But, players are doing all kinds of stuff that I don't quite understand all the time. For me, it's, did you play well? Did you not play well? And, the case, like you said, the case could be made that he
did not.
Most games this season was not as physical as he needed to be. Right. And so doing all that at the end of the game, the end of the last game, I don't feel it. But players are always doing stuff like that I don't necessarily, again, I'm at that age where I just say, hey, like this different generation, y'all going to do what you do. As long as you play well, that's fine with me. I don't know. Right.
I agree with you.
Critical. I'm critical of how he didn't play well. Right. Not whatever he chooses to do as far as, the rest of his on field and off the field, that's on him. But yeah, I don't know. It doesn't sit perfectly with me, all of that, because they were 9-8, because they're not a playoff team. But what matters to me more than anything is that they come out next year angry and better, right? That's kind of what it comes down to. And I think that fans are looking for something to be frustrated with because the team underperformed. And so when you see something like that, it becomes a big target for fans to be upset about. And I think I understand that they're frustrated. You spent all year rooting for this team, and this team let us down big time. Yeah. Big time based on the talent.
That's fair. They definitely got a lot of questions to answer for. And maybe you're right. And there are more paths to what would, I guess, in your best case scenario, a successful offseason realistically would lead to what outcome? A playoff win?
Next season?
Yeah. Like, let's say they do all the right moves, in your book, whatever that looks like.
I think this team, with literally just a couple of moves, I think this team is competing for the NFC West. And I think the winner of the NFC West is conceivably the number 1 seed in the NFC. I think that's how much talent this team has. That's how much top end talent this team has. I believe that. I believe that DK Metcalf has the talent to be a top 5, top 3 wide receiver in the NFL. I believe Charles Cross, despite his struggles this season, has the talent to be a top 5 left tackle in the NFL. You get last year's Geno Smith. You got 2 very above average running backs with different styles. You've got an up and coming, incredible wide receiver 2 in Jackson Smith and Jigba. You re-sign Leonard Williams. You have Jaron Reed, right? That's the beginnings of a very.
You got to re-sign him too, don't you? Mm-hmm. Wasn't he on a 1 year?
Jaron, I didn't see Jaron on the free agent list.
Oh, they must sign him to 2. You're right. I think they did sign him to 2.
And then you have Nwosu coming back, coupled with Mafe, right? You have to change middle linebacker. You have to figure out who's replacing Jamal Adams. I still trust Quandre Diggs. He might be slowing down a touch, but he's so smart on that back end. And you've got probably the best cornerback tandem in the NFL if Reek Woolen comes back in his rookie year version and not this year's version. I don't think it takes much. I really don't. But the biggest thing, like we said, is philosophically, they have to define who they are, and they have to have a defensive scheme that works in present day NFL. If those things happen, I believe they are competing with the San Francisco 49ers for the NFC West championship at the end of the 2024 season. And then you're supplementing, your inside linebacker may come from the draft. It might be one of those 3rd round picks, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. You're going to have to figure out what's going on at right tackle. You have to figure out the interior line. Who are you re-signing? Who are you not re-signing? You're going to have to find a pass-catching tight end to replace Noah Fant if you don't re-sign him, right? Yep. You have to let Jordan Brooks go. Leonard Williams has to want to come back on the terms that you give him, right? There's a lot of things that have to fall into place, but they're things that are feasible. We're not talking about, having to find an elite player at every one of these positions. It's just you have to make the right decision 4 or 5 different times. But again, it goes back to Pete. It goes back to that D coordinator job. It goes back to defining who you are. Offensively, the offense is fine right now, but what kind of offense are you? What are you going to do? What are you known for? What are you hanging your hat on? I still can't say it after 17 games. I can't say who the Seahawks are. That's an issue. Yeah. But the talent is there. I would rather root for a team that has the talent and is trying to tweak than a team that doesn't have the talent and is struggling, is like the 7-10 team that's not picking in the top 3 and doesn't have the talent to get there. I think that the Seahawks are still in a very enviable place, but they have to make the right decisions. They must make the right decisions this offseason or else it's disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I agree with a lot of your perspective. It's hard for me to feel that way. And it's probably just cynicism of seeing so many off seasons butchered in the past, especially when it comes to this stage. I think I trust John Snyder in a rebuilding phase. I think he does great with that. I think there have been legitimate questions about making the right decision when it comes to what gets you over the hump. John himself has seemed to struggle with that, and he's going to have to prove that he's overcome that hump because it's a different mindset than what it was 2 off seasons ago. Even it's very different. And we know it's hard, especially in terms of who you keep and who you let go. They tend to be more emotional with that type of thing and value loyalty. And that tends to lead them to make some pretty tough decisions that they end up having to wear for a long period of time. And I think it's those things that sort of prevent me from seeing it as optimistically. Really, it's just cynicism. I don't disagree with any of your points. They're all very good points because I strongly believe in the talent on this roster. I really do. I think they just need to be put in the proper position on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
I think all around, I think there's still room for the talent to grow because there are some young pieces that you're building around mixed in, like I said, with a good group of veterans. So I feel like the roster was balanced, but I don't trust that they're going to make the right. I think that their loyalty is going to prevent them from making the tough decisions that they need to make, like letting Brooks go. But it's a huge deal if they can do some of those things. I think if they can let him walk and sign Leonard Williams instead, it's absolutely the right way to go. It's just like you said, in the modern NFL, the D line matters more than these inside linebackers. And I really do think they need some younger guys to draft that they can cover. So
you need an inside linebacker that can cover in today's NFL. I always think about, I remember Levon Kirkland was inside linebacker in the Steelers 3-4 defense for years. And the reason I remember him, he was an all-pro and he was great. But the reason I remember him is he was almost 300 pounds and could run, but he was this big, huge kind of old school run stopping inside linebacker. And there's not modern day NFL. You have to be able to do both or else the good coordinators and the good coaches are going to absolutely pick you apart. Yep. And the Seahawks have not one, but 2 inside linebackers who can get picked apart at any point in time. And I know I've said this 30 times on the Seahawks 360, but like, you can't just keep hitting your head against the wall and doing the same darn thing over and over and over again.
You think so?
I don't know. I think it's a no-brainer to let Jordan Brooks go. And I like Jordan Brooks, but it's Jordan Brooks or Bobby Wagner. And at this point in time, if Wagner's costing you $5 million and Brooks is costing you 15 or 14, that's an easy decision to make, right?
Right.
Use one of those 3rd-round picks, find a fast, rangy inside linebacker to pair next to Wagner, have Wagner teach him everything he knows, mentor him, and then eventually towards the end of the year, that's the inside linebacker that's on the field in nickel. It's not Wagner. It's the young kid that has the physical ability to cover running backs and tight ends and has been under the tutelage of Wagner long enough to start to be able to be that middle linebacker on the field by himself.
It comes to the coaching staff realizing, because they could have did that this year.
Totally.
They could have put Devin. I'm not a huge Devin Bush fan. I know some people hate him, but I do think he can cover better than anybody else in that linebacker room. And so I think they could have made the decision to even Brooks actually did pretty well in coverage overall this year. I mean, considering his history, relative to his history, he did very well in coverage this past year. I think they could have made the decision to put Brooks in those situations in nickel, and they just didn't.
Right.
So why would they change now?
Because you didn't win. You didn't win. You went 9-8. You didn't make the playoffs. You have to change a lot, right? What you've been doing is proven to be wrong and proven to not work. You got to do something. You got to do something different, right? And then the last thing for me on the defense is, well, 2 things. I love what this defensive line potentially looks like. I love this defensive line, and I'm including the edges with that. But I think the
Questionable
defensive
depth.
line is fun. It's strong. It's stout. It's tough. It's not the issue totally with the running game. I think there are other issues with the running game. But replacing that Jamal Adams role, right? Finding another safety who's not a liability. And I know Julian Love had some good games, but I don't think Julian Love is necessarily the answer. I think that will complete the secondary. That and a third corner will complete the secondary in a way that it becomes, potentially the best secondary in the NFL. You just have these tweaks that you have these little tiny tweaks, right, that can make this team great.
Do you think Darren Reed can duplicate another year?
I don't think he has to. I think if you get 90% of what he did this year, you're still in a really good spot. I think they do need another interior defensive lineman because if you have Williams, Reed, and Jones, but then you add someone else to rotate in, then you're in, again, one of those third-round picks. You find some big plugger, run-stopping sort of interior player who's physical. I think that makes a big difference. Yeah. But again, I'm not saying you got to go out and sign a perennial all-pro and Seahawks have no talent. These are small tweaks. Finding a second safety in the NFL, modern day NFL, is not super difficult, right? Mm-hmm. Finding a linebacker that can cover, they're super valuable, but that's why you're so good. John Schneider's so good as a GM. He has the ability to find what he's looking for. Yep. Drafting NFL caliber, guards is not the most difficult thing in the world. And so these are tweaks that I think can happen. But again, it goes back to you need a coach who's going to be able to implement new systems and change his stripes at 73, what will be 73 years old.
Yeah.
That's the ask, right? That's the big mountain to climb.
That's the big ask. Yep. 100%. 100%. All right. Well, you've talked me a little bit off the ledge. I'm glad. Yep. I'm not committed. I'm not going to jump. I'm going to make a picnic here.
You're peeking. You're peeking over the edge right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. All right, Tino. Well, it's really been a great season. I'm glad that you joined on with me. It's been great talking ball with you. Why don't you tell the people where they can find you? And I'm not sure. Well, I'll let you get into your spiel, and then I'll get into mine.
All right. So you can find me on Twitter at Tino Jr. 20, TINOJR20. That's my personal account. I always have links to the SportsEthos Mariners cast, my Seattle Mariners baseball podcast. I also have links on my personal account to some of the fantasy baseball stuff I do on my own. Yes, there's lots going on. Super excited about that. And then the Ethos Mariners account is ETHOSMARINERS on Twitter. But Seattle sports, fantasy baseball, all those things. I love this time of year. I recorded a fantasy baseball podcast with 3 buddies of mine last night. Today we're doing the Mariners cast or the Seahawks 360. Tomorrow I'm doing a Mariners cast. Tomorrow I'm also doing a fantasy baseball, minor league baseball players podcast. Like, this is podcast season for me. Yes, I do work. I do have another job, but this, for me, this is a blast and keeps me motivated. And I don't know. We're lucky to have sports. We're lucky to have the Seahawks. And this, I have to say, Candace, I've had a blast doing this with you this season. It's really filled a void for me as far as, my Seahawks fan experience. And I look forward to this off season and to you and your family, good health. I know you guys have some fun stuff coming along the way, but yeah, it's been awesome. It's been really awesome. I've had a blast with you. Most definitely.
Mm-hmm. And in that line, also, I've sort of been waiting to the end to go ahead and announce, but I'm expecting to have a baby here in March.
Yeah.
So I will say to my SportsEthos fan base, the off season will be a lot slower. I really, last year, I felt I was proud of my draft coverage and sort of having some live streams and some breakdowns. I got to be honest, guys, I probably can't do that this off season. It's too close. I think the draft is like April 24th or something like that. And I would have had my baby ideally March 17th. So it's going to be tough for me to get a ton of draft coverage in the way that I want to this year. But I promise I will deep dive in that because something I really did enjoy. It was the deep dive in the draft coverage. I just sort of have to make a commitment to my family. But what I think that we can do is throughout the season, as updates come in and as news comes in and as signings happen, me and Tino can hop up on here and talk about those things. So you'll still hear from us in the off season. This will be a lot more of a hiatus than it was before, I think. But like I said, it's only temporary. Just let me get my bearings and my rhythm with my new baby, and then we'll be able to get some consistent off-season content because I really did enjoy. I think it was actually one of my favorite parts of the season was doing a lot of that draft coverage and things like that last off-season. So anywho, do be sure to follow the show because we are. It's such a strange off season for me. A lot of announcements, updates will go out on the page. So follow us at Ethos Seahawks. Again, follow Tino. He's got some great stuff going. He'll definitely keep you going with Mariner stuff. So we appreciate him. I'm really grateful for you, Tino. Really appreciate having you on here. It's made this really a lot more of I enjoyed the experience before, but it's a lot more engaging. Just fun to talk, debates with somebody. So anywho, follow the show, guys. And I think as we close, as always,
go hard.